Hello there, how you all doing? I've tried making this video a few times. Each time I get mad. Every single time. Yet again. So, I'm going to try and remain calm. Ish. One of the reasons I've decided to do my Psywar series on psychological warfare and psychological operations is because the psychological war that is being waged against us at the moment is huge, and it's winning. I've seen countless videos talking about how the British are waking up and finally getting their heads together and their acts together, and they're all like giving a generally positive message, I suppose. But I can't see it. If the British people are really waking up, I think it's, like I've often said, with a great many people who believe that they're awake, so to speak. They're waking up within a dream, still in that lucid dreaming state. They've chosen their actions or the way that their psyop will be constructed around them. And this is by design, obviously, because I wouldn't be talking about psychological war otherwise, would I? Part of the psyop is this. It's Israel. They are your assigned enemy. Whenever the actors, the players, should I say, the manipulators at the top want to steer us in a certain direction, they will give us an enemy first. And they will do everything they can at their disposal to paint that enemy as the enemy. They'll fabricate evidence, they'll put people in positions of power, they'll engineer statecraft at a phenomenal level, all to get you to focus on one enemy. But they don't do it all at once. They start it gradually and keep it at a very sort of minor level for a very long time, and then begin to ramp things up. Israel falls into that gap, falls into that sort of form of psychological operation. These psyops, they give you a binary. You can either be one side or the other. They are highly emotional, highly volatile, they involve a level of sort of misdirection and deception that is mind-blowing. And it seems that things flitter out and then build back up and then flitter out and then build back up again. And it does this several times, but there's never really sort of any sort of resolution to what is occurring. And that's what you've seen with Israel and Gaza for the past nearly a century. Israel and Palestine, should I say. The Gaza thing came a bit later. Around 2005, when I think it was when Hamas got in. 2006. And they're another engineered fake terrorist organisation that we created. The Crown. It's technically the US and UK, but when you understand who's actually at the top of the pyramid, it's the Paisher family, who are Franco-American, French-American, royal. Things tend to become a bit more clear. See, when people talk about the Crown, the Crown is an entity, not as a monarchy, so to speak. Many assume that what it's actually meaning is just the British sort of crown, but that's not it. That's not it. In the 1688 Bill of Rights, there was a declaration that said that if the French crown should fall, then the British would absorb it into the British crown. If the British crown should fall, then the French crown would absorb that into the French crown. And they became one entity, particularly after the French Revolution, when Louis XVI was beheaded. Everyone thought that he cut the head off the snake, or one of the heads of the Hydra, so to speak. They killed the monarchy, they killed all his family. That's all they thought. The job's done. No. He was smuggled into England and became a guest of George IV until he was 21. And then he moved to the US, was given a boatload of gold, the state of Georgia, told I'll have it, have at it, and he did. By 1890, the Paisers owned everything in America. Patriarch LCP, Louis Cass Paisser, then set his sights on the UK, trapped most of the billionaires in the US and the Rothschild family into it, supplanting their wealth into the Federal Reserve, thinking that they were going to get control of the money supply. But LCP had put a little clause in the stock exchange. If you float your money on the stock exchange, float your business on the stock exchange, they get 95%. Of course, they hide this within insurance and licensing agreements and all sorts of other stuff. But that's effectively what they do. And because they were determined to make the Federal Reserve a private bank, and to make it federal, they had to float it on the stock exchange because it had to be international to trade. He took them over and took half of the Rothschilds' wealth. He then sent one of his good friends, Wallace Simpson, over to meet Edward VIII, and the rest is history. The takeover was in 1925. That was when the Pisces literally eventually owned everything. 4 years later, there was the Great Depression in the US as they consolidated all the rest of the banks. This affected the rest of the world. They consolidated a lot more of the banks around the world. And the Rothschilds have been pretty much agents of theirs ever since. They were for the crown entity before that. The line of Charlemagne, the divine line. Everything you believe you've learned about the Rothschild family is false. So people like David Icke and your Whitney Webbs and blah 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 who go on about the Rothschilds constantly, full of shit. The Rothschilds were never Jewish. That's another thing. They used that to hide who they were. When they moved to the UK after the Austrian War of Accession, and us in the UK started kicking out all the Hungarians and all the Austrians and Germanics that were living in the UK and took all their assets. We started selling them off, all them assets, but to Jews, because we knew they had money. And the Bauer, B-A-U-R, sent their weakest over to try and capitalise on that. They changed the name to Rothschild because the Bauers were well known for backing the Habsburgs. And if he'd have been caught, he would have been killed. Anyway, his ruse worked. They made a lot of money. This is what people need to wake up to.
At this point, you couldn't convince me, even if you tried, that this stunt that we're seeing play out with Joe Kent is in any way organic. That letter he wrote the other day, total fraud. Question that I now have, how long has Joe Kent been working with Candace Owens? How long has he been tied in directly with the group of people who are actively engaged in trying to destroy the MAGA agenda and engaging in a color revolution against the American people in this country? How long has he been doing it? Do you remember Mitch Snow? Yeah, you remember Mitch Snow. You know, the fraudster that Candace Owens platformed and raised over $100,000 for, the one who accused Erica Kirk of being on base at Fort Huachuca the night before the super secret meeting that he just happened to walk in on. You know, the meeting that they alleged was the meeting they were planning the assassination of Charlie Kirk. Do you remember him? Did you see this?
I know Candace said you were vetted. Who vetted you?
Oh, jeez. Yeah. You know, I let that slip once, and maybe I wasn't supposed to, but yeah, it was Joe Kent. She trusted him. Yeah, Joe Kent. He can take the records, go look it up, dial stuff in. He knows more about my records than I do. He has access to it straight up.
He has access, yeah. And Candace trusts him. Tucker trusts him. Megan trusts him.
Seems like a lot of white hats that are in the know trust him.
I mean, you heard it. Mitch Snow is alleging that Candace Owens put him in direct contact with Joe Kent, the director of the National Counterterrorism Center, to vet him so that she could feel comfortable putting him on her platform. And he did it. Question, Mr. Kent, how long have you been working with Candace Owens? How long have you been helping her to create the propaganda narratives that she has now been pushing across all of this country for the last 6 months? How deeply involved in providing information to Candace Owens have you been? It all makes sense now. Joe Kent has been working with the people who are trying to destroy the MAGA agenda and was just activated.
All right, guys, if you are a lifelong Democrat and you're asking yourself, what the hell happened to my party? I just want you to know that you are not alone. The Democratic Party has rooted its entire identity on one thing, being anti-Trump. They have no other identity, And this has now led them to being pro-IRGC. And you know, it's interesting to see how this war with Iran has finally brought so many lifelong Democrats to their moment of reckoning. Because this moment is really a perfect storm that exposes every single one of their fraudulent positions at once. And you find yourself asking, well, what if I support the destruction of a murderous terrorist regime that wants to destroy America? How do I reconcile my support for that with my party's stance? You see, for years, the hypocrisy inside the Democratic Party was much easier to hide. They could talk a big game about human rights, about democracy, in the abstract. But in this current moment with Iran, well, it makes it impossible for them to hide what they have become. First, you have the pro-democracy lie, because we have the Iranian people who are literally in the streets, getting shot, getting killed, fighting for secular democratic freedom that we Americans claim to treasure. And these heroic Iranians have been sacrificing their lives to overthrow a regime that has been murdering and oppressing them since 1979. They are the perfect embodiment of a pro-democracy movement. And the left's response to this? Silence. That is until the US finally attacks. And then they speak up. But when they speak up against the very attack that's goal is to restore democracy, human rights, women's rights, freedom. Again, we are talking about a regime that kills Americans, that wants to destroy the West, that has tentacles in every part of the world, promoting terror in the name of radical Islam. And the Democratic Party is against removing them from power. Yeah, so people are finally starting to see through the BS, but what's happening inside the party goes even deeper. You see, the Democratic Party, they couldn't rally behind the Iranian people because their whole worldview, their whole ideology is largely built on a binary construct of oppressor versus oppressed. And they've somehow categorized the brutal terrorist regime, the IRGC, as oppressed because they are anti-American. Now, this is a level of moral sickness that is so depraved. They have actually convinced themselves that America is the oppressor of the world, and so anyone against us is a victim, even when they are murderous terrorists. It is a real illness, and I'm going to prove it to you in real time. You see, because the moment when the US attacked the IRGC, the Democratic Party had a choice. They could either side with America and the freedoms and the values that this country was built on while simultaneously siding with the Iranian people who want these actual oppressors, murderous terrorists, gone, or they could side with their one true guiding principle, which is whatever Trump does is bad. And they did what they always do. They went up against Trump, though this time that meant siding with the largest exporter of terrorism in the world. And that's when it clicked for people that the party stance, it's not about freedom. It's not about democracy. It's not about national security. It's not about human rights. Because this moment made it impossible not to see that the Democratic Party arrived at their stance on the war with Iran through the one principle that they currently hold, which is political opposition. They would rather defend the strategic interests of a terrorist state than support Donald Trump for weakening them. The hollowness of what the party has become has been revealed, because when your entire ideology collapses into being against one person, then you really have no ideology. You have nothing. And the war with Iran has proved in real time that the Democratic Party has completely unraveled. It is not about what is right and what is wrong or what is best for America or the world. It is only about being against Trump. And when you see that truth laid bare, whether or not you like Trump, you cannot unsee it. So to my friends out there who are feeling politically homeless today, I just want you to know that you did not abandon the Democratic Party. They abandoned.
There are, unfortunately, continuous Iranian claims that the attacks are attacks on US assets or on US bases in Qatar and the region. We reject this claim which cannot be accepted under any circumstance. The biggest proof of this is that the attack which happened yesterday was an attack on a Qatari natural gas facility, which is a source of income for the Qatari people. But not just for the Qatari people. What they did yesterday also impacted the millions of people which Qatar is helping.
Show you how CNN is able to get you to believe the exact opposite of the truth just by using some very choice language.
Iranian bombers came within just 2 minutes of striking the largest military base housing U.S. troops in the Middle East.
Now, just from hearing that report, you would probably believe that Iran got really close to striking us, right? Here's the reality. He said they were 2 minutes away. Do you know that those jets travel between 30 to 40 miles per minute? Meaning that they were roughly 60 to 80 miles away from the base. Do you know the distance from Iran to Qatar? It's about 110 miles. So in reality, that means that those bombers got in the air in Iran, and about a minute later, were intercepted by Qatari fighter jets. Right? So the reality is that we got Iran locked the fuck down. That their planes get in the air, and within a minute, we're on them. But if you listen to the CNN report, it sounds like, they got so close. Oh, we don't really have them locked down. They're coming for us. No, that the reality shows that anything that launches from Iran, they got about 60 seconds until they're painted by fighter jets. That's the reality. See how you can give the exact same information? See, you can communicate the exact same facts, but the way you word it can drastically change what people think. This is how outlets like CNN manipulate you into thinking.
Years ago, President Trump doubled down on his disagreement with the Israeli attack on Iran's South Pars oil field. When asked if he had talked to Netanyahu about the attack, he said this.
I told him, don't do that, and he won't do that. But on occasion, he'll do something, and if I don't like it, and so we're not doing that anymore.
The President of the United States just told Israel no, on camera at the White House. And within 24 hours, he took on NATO with this post. Without the USA, NATO is a paper tiger. They didn't want to join the fight to stop a nuclear-powered Iran. Cowards, and we will remember. Israel and NATO slapped down within 24 hours. One for its military action, the other for its complete lack of it. But both in service to the same master. Britain's great game strategy to keep the Middle East in perpetual turmoil, controlling the world economy through energy choke points. Donald Trump is done playing that game. But if you're trying to make sense of this by following the media, mainstream or otherwise, good luck. Is the U.S. being run by Israel, as Joe Kent and Tucker Carlson claim? Is the world economy in chaos? Has Trump been caught flat-footed, in the Strait, or by Iran, or by our so-called allies? Here's the real deal. Donald Trump laid it all out last December in his national security strategy, and he is executing that policy with absolute precision. I'm Susan Kokinda. When the national security strategy dropped last December, I was one of the first to highlight its importance, because I've spent decades studying how U.S. foreign policy was subverted by British imperial thinking. So if you want to be on the leading edge of this revolution, please hit those like, share, and subscribe buttons so we can stay in touch and expand our reach. Here's what I'm going to cover today. First, what's driving Trump's break with Israel and NATO, and how the NSS explains every move he's making. And second, how the new deal with Japan shows the world what comes next. So let's go back to what Trump said about Israel and NATO this week. Trump blasted Israel for bombing the South Pars gas field in Iran, which triggered Iranian retaliation against Qatar's LNG facility. Here's what Trump said. Israel, out of anger for what has taken place in the Mideast, has violently lashed out at a major facility known as the South Pars gas field in Iran. No more attacks will be made by Israel pertaining to this extremely important and valuable South Pars field. He then threatens Iran against further retaliation. But he stresses, I do not want to authorize this level of violence and destruction because of the long-term implications that it'll have on the future of Iran. Both Israel and Iran, in the same post, on notice, stop attacking energy infrastructure. That is not standard American presidential behavior. That is a president whose interests don't align with either party in that conflict. Then Axios spelled out what's really going on with this headline. Trump aides foresee Iran endgame divide. Israel doesn't hate chaos. A White House official told Axios bluntly, Israel doesn't hate the chaos. We do. We want stability. Netanyahu, not so much, especially in Iran. That sums it up. Chaos is the operating principle of the great game, and Trump just said it out loud, that his partner in this war has different objectives than he does. The president, the Secretary of War, DNI Director Tulsi Gabbard have all made that clear, and Trump has said it more bluntly and publicly than any American president since Eisenhower in the Suez Crisis. Now ask yourself, who benefits from disruption of oil supplies in the Middle East? This has been the fulcrum of Britain's great game for more than a century. Use a volatile Mideast and its vast oil supply as a point of economic blackmail. Iran and the forces of regional chaos have been key assets in this game, and so has Israel, certainly under Netanyahu. Now, that brings us to NATO. Trump called out their foot-dragging on the Strait of Hormuz, and he called it exactly what it is, cowardice. NATO and its overlords in London are perfectly happy to keep wars going in Ukraine and rattle sabers at Russia and China, but won't lift a finger to keep open the shipping lanes their own economies depend on. The mask is off. NATO is the enforcement arm for perpetual conflict, not collective defense. And the same goes for London itself, whose insurance companies triggered the initial shutdown through financial mechanisms.
اول که وارد این فعالیت هسته شدیم واقعا هدفمون ساخت بمب بود دیگه، ما تعارف که نداریم.
یعنی شما میگید هدف ساخت بمب بوده واقعا؟
100%.
هدف کی این بوده؟ یعنی
کل نظام یا همه اونایی که این فعالیت رو شروع کردن واقعا هدف ساخت بمب بود. حالا که شروع کرده بودیم و دیگه می‌خواستیم کار خب اینو شما اگه میتونستیم اینو حفظش کنیم و بمب آزمایش می‌کردیم کار تموم شده بود. مثل در پاکستان ما که شروع کردیم بعد تا آخرش.
حالا اینه که شما میگید میگم چون ما تا حالا رسمی خیلی نشدیم کسی این صحبت رو کنه. اینایی که شما میگید تبعاتی نداره مثلا مذاکرات و اینها به عنوان بالاخره کسی که
ما توجه نداره.
با خارجی بالاخره پیدا میکنه.
While the full extent of the damage remains uncertain, Iran has acknowledged setbacks, and International Atomic Energy Agency Director General Rafael Grossi recently estimated that Iran's nuclear program had been delayed by months rather than years. Nevertheless, Borrighetti dismissed the US President Donald Trump's long-standing demand for zero enrichment as delusional. Trump and officials in his orbit had earlier claimed the strikes had obliterated Iran's nuclear capacity, a characterization Iranian officials now openly dispute. In response to IIA criticism over a lack of transparency and cooperation, Iran's parliament has called for suspending collaboration with IAEA inspectors, accusing the agency of political bias. The IAEA had previously raised alarm over undeclared nuclear materials and activities, expressing concerns about Iran's compliance with the Non-Proliferation Treaty, NPT Safeguards Agreement. Iranian Foreign Ministry spokesperson Esmail Bakai pushed back firmly against such allegations.
There has never been weapons-grade enrichment in Iran. Please, you can go through the reports by the IAEA and show me one single clue or evidence of Iran's nuclear program deviating from peaceful purposes.
Tehran maintains that its nuclear ambitions are solely civilian in nature. Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei has repeatedly stated that the development and use of nuclear weapons are forbidden under Islamic law, framing the bomb as morally and religiously unacceptable. Yet the timing and tone of Iran's latest remarks raise concerns among Western analysts and policymakers. Since the strikes, both Tehran and Washington have shown little interest in reviving diplomatic engagement, a development that may further escalate regional tensions. Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian has formally approved legislation to suspend cooperation with the United Nations nuclear watchdog, the International Atomic Energy Agency, IAEA, following US airstrikes on critical Iranian nuclear facilities, according to Iranian state media. The move marks a significant escalation in Tehran's response to heightened tensions with Washington, coming just weeks after a limited Iran-Israel conflict and retaliatory American strikes that targeted several high-priority nuclear sites inside the Islamic Republic. Masoud Pezeshkian promulgated the law suspending cooperation with the International Atomic Energy Agency. Iranian state television announced Wednesday, confirming the measure is now officially in effect. The suspension stems from a law passed last month by Iran's parliament following the strikes and recently ratified by the country's powerful constitutional oversight body, the Guardian Council. With Pezeshkian's signature, the measure has now cleared all legal and procedural hurdles.
Normally, when we put things in a report of not only of Iran, of any member state, we have a dialogue, a conversation about it, because it is, in most of the cases, it refers to something we have found or an opinion we have on something. So the idea is that, in all fairness, because these procedures, the report making is based on a certain procedure, you give a chance to the country in question to put questions or to. This case is different. Here it is a fact. We don't have something that needs interpretation. Here, unfortunately, and this dates to a few years ago, I would say, where, unfortunately, we could determine with all clarity that documents that belong to the agency were in the hands of Iranian authorities, which is bad. And this is part of our assessment on the cooperation. So, the board requested me to provide a comprehensive review on many things, including how they have cooperated. We believe that an action like this is not compatible with the spirit of cooperation. If we are referring to the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, as I say quite often, the situation continues to be very fragile, and if anything, for anybody following the conflict, we know that the level of military activity is increasing, not decreasing. And if you have followed our updates, you may have seen that we had to report on further incursions of drones, including in areas inside or very close to the reactors, the training center and other places. So when it comes to the site over there, we continue to believe that the situation is quite fragile. Then you have the rest of the nuclear power infrastructure in Ukraine, where again the erosion of the infrastructure in the country continues to have an impact on nuclear safety. You may remember our work on the substations, on the electric and the grid and the substations, because they are the ones feeding the NPPs and facilitating the cooling function. So the situation continues to be a serious one. The concern is that I think we need to be very clear, precisely in order to give the general public an idea that neither exaggerates nor diminishes the meaning of this. And I say it because it is true that enriching uranium per se is not a forbidden activity, which is something my Iranian counterparts always tell me, and they tell the world. So that is true. At the same time, when you accumulate and continue to accumulate, and you are the only country in the world that is doing something like this at a level which is very, very close to the level that you need to have a nuclear explosive device, then we cannot ignore it. It is not per se a forbidden activity, but we cannot ignore at least a coincidence between them and us, that in the current circumstances you cannot start any nuclear power plant, or that nuclear power plant in particular, given the accumulation of factors. Well, I was referring right now to the military situation. There are other more technical aspects, like, for example, the availability of enough water to cool down the reactors, or also the availability of sufficient external power supply in a way that is stable, so that you can rest assured that if it's started, there will be no blackout and the plant will be able to operate. We support the bilateral negotiation. We try to help them in any possible way when they ask us to do so. But our process continues. At the same time, we are aware of the fact that the approach, the attitude, the disposition of Iran with regards or vis-a-vis the IAEA or the work with us is, if not dependent, very, very much influenced by what they see on the other process. If they feel, to put it in even more simple terms, if they see progress there, I guess concomitantly they are going to be more cooperative and more active in our process. Syria, very important what we are doing there. It has been a little bit on the back burner for many, many years, but still very relevant, because the probe into what had been happening in Syria in the past was sort of, well, I was saying back burner, I can say frozen. Again, to use a contradictory analogy, we were not being able to complete what we should be doing. And what I requested from President Shara, and he agreed and granted, was an immediate access to Lord Lucan, which is a very important, used to be a very important facility where uranium conversion, processing and fuel fabrication for the reactor at Deir al-Zur was taking place. So we were able to go there and complete a very thorough process of sample taking.
Something I forgot to mention, which I find pretty damn funny, is those that are speaking against Trump and what he's doing in Iran and speaking out against the Iran war. One of their narratives is that the US is losing, and losing massively. The thing is, that's not a good thing either, because then that proves that Trump was right, that Iran were that much of a significant threat, and therefore what he's doing is justified. So you're decrying that they shouldn't be in this war because Iran is absolutely annihilating the US and Israel. That should be a warning to everyone. It's not the flex you think it is. And you're just proving all of us right. Morons. Many of you will be asking a couple of questions, especially if you're new. First of all, where is he now? Where has he changed direction? Where has he changed location? I teleport. Yes, it's a well-known fact. You can ask the others, those at the back. I teleport. I do it to amuse myself, I think. And the other one, probably, and regular viewers will be asking, this is, why are you talking about the Pisces again? We've already gone through this. I got a comment. I think it was on me. Was it on my Tucker Carlson video? It was something like that anyway. And they were trying to say, first of all, that the Windsors are Jewish. Which is ridiculous. And started to go on about the crown being a Jewish invention and several other things, symbolism that was involved with it, involved with the line of David, and yada 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 yada, you know, the usual gubbins. I think trying to sound more intelligent and more researched than they actually were. Regular viewers will know exactly what I'm going to say now. It doesn't stem to the line of David, and I've explained this countless times. The Levant and the Fertile Crescent and where Israel is and blah 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 isn't the be all and end all of where all this began. It's not at all. The European royal houses, right, stem from Charlemagne, who is himself a descendant of Merovec, who was the first of the Merovingian kings. And everyone now will be going, yeah, we know all this and his birth and everything else. But this just goes out to that one guy that was basically trying to tell me something that wasn't true. This is where the legends of the Dragon Kings come from, because of the demonic influence and everything else. It's from Merovec. Merovec's conception is the fact that he was Nephilim. He was the product of a fallen angel and a human woman, who was Merovec's mother. And Queen, can't remember her name. It's beside the point. Some people, right, have tried, rather disingenuously, to claim that the Merovingians are in fact from the Levant and are descendants of the Anunnaki from that area. That's half right, in the sense that the Anunnaki are what people call fallen angels. Fallen angels are Anunnaki, but the Anunnaki weren't from there either. And neither was the Merovingians. Merovec himself was the first king of what is now southwestern Germany and the eastern half of France, down towards the Mediterranean coast, and then it split off, and you had the Catalonia, which was the southern part of France and northern part of Spain. That was Catalonia, right? Then you have over this side of the Normans, who have all of Normandy, right? The Normans are very famous. Everyone knows who the Normans are because of 1066 and them invading Britain and William the Conqueror, well, William the Bastard as he was known, killing off Harold, right? We all know that. Now, what is also an established fact is that Merovec's family and the Normans are from the same tribes, right? Descend from the same tribe. What is also an established fact is that the Normans were Vikings. Or rather, they stemmed from that area of Scandinavia, of far northern Norway, Sweden and Finland, right? They are essentially cousins, yeah? The Normans and the Franks. They stem from the same area. So they can't be Jewish, right? It's just a geographical impossibility. We know this, yeah? One of the reasons why Merovec ended up taking over, right? Taking over that part of France after they came down from Hanover, yeah? Hanover, Germany, and took over that part of Germany and down into France, was partly due to the Normans, right? When the Normans descended on Normandy, they just supplanted themselves there and refused to move. And eventually, I forget which king it was, he ended up turning around and saying, well, we're just going to have to give it to them. They won't leave. We can't make them leave because they keep destroying our armies every time we send someone over. So we're going to have to, we'll just let them have it. And Normandy became a separate part of France, basically, a separate nation. And then they gradually sort of blended themselves in after William died, William the Bastard. His sons ended up taking over the rest of France after that. Merivec's very important, right? As I've mentioned before, there's a lot of lore surrounding Merivec and his descendants, Charlemagne being one of them. As I've also mentioned before as well, they were Nephilim, so they were classed as fallen angels, right? Half fallen angel. So this is why they were feared. They were seen as close to divinity as any king could get, right? In Europe at the time, especially the newly forming Christianized Europe. That's the way they saw it. So they were a very powerful family, right? They started spreading the seed out all over the place. Charlemagne, this was a couple of generations down the line. He was the great grandson or great grandson of Merivec. When he unified Europe, when he unified, well, what was then the Holy Roman Empire, which he sort of established in a way, right? When he did that, it was aiming to go and take over what is now Italy, right? But they were all papal states at that one time. And he was marching towards Rome, towards the Pope. The Pope, seeing this, did something very smart. He turned around and said, if you don't invade Rome, I will anoint you as the first emperor of the Holy Roman Church. And I will consecrate your empire. Now, Charlemagne was pagan, right? He was never Christian, let's get this straight. Charlemagne was pagan. But he saw the advantages of being anointed by the Pope and having the empire consecrated with the growing Christian populations that were in that empire. So he accepted. This did something else though. Because Charlemagne was Nephilim, because the Pope was the mouthpiece of God, his anointing of Charlemagne released the exile that had been imposed on Charlemagne's bloodline by God on his great-great-grandfather because of that Nephilim blood. This then made them divine, literally divine. And they've been known as the divine line ever since. It has nothing to do with Jews or Israel or the line of David in any way, shape or form. It is everything to do with Charlemagne and Merivec and their bloodline, where they come from. So, you start looking at symbolism. They mentioned the harp being, the harp and the lion being a symbol of that David used. Yes and no, right? There are several origins of where the harp and the lion motifs come from and the symbology. It's not linked to Judaism, though, the origins of it. The lion can be attributed to Gilgamesh, that's fine, yeah? There's a lot of symbol, like lion symbology with Gilgamesh in that. That's not where it comes from. The harp, let's start with the harp. In Greek mythology, especially Orphic, right, which is older, than the dynastic Greek mythology, right? Or imperial Greek, should I say. In the Orphic myths, Apollo, along with being the god of the sun, right? The sun god, and son of Zeus, that was the god of storms. That is also attributed to Yahweh as well, don't forget that. Was also a virtuoso lyre player, right? And now a lyre looks like a harp, yeah? It's an instrument that was widely used around not just Greece, but Rome and also Egypt. Yeah. It was also well known for that, for playing the lyre. Yeah. Now Orpheus painted him as that because he loved Apollo, and Orpheus was also a musician. He also played the lyre as well, right? So he liked to link himself in with Apollo. So he's the Sun King, right? Remember that, he's the Sun King. And he also plays the lyre, right? The harp. The lion imagery comes from Hercules. Hercules. The tales of Hercules are far older than even Gilgamesh. When you actually trace them back, it's the same with the Greek mythology, right? The Greek gods. When you actually trace the Norse gods back, yeah, or the Celtic ones, they stem back tens of thousands of years. But Hercules was attributed to the lion, right? Because that was the first task that he completed. I've forgotten what the bloody thing's called now. But he was assigned 12 tasks by Zeus to prove his being a demigod, right? Now, after Charlemagne, there were several kings, right? We'll get to this now. Why they're attributed together, yeah? Well, why I'm talking about the Greek gods and everything else. When you get to Louis XIV, right? He adopts the title of Sun King, right? And he's also called that by all of his court and everybody. And every single king after him of France were called the Sun King, right? They were the monarchy of the sun. They were the divine line. And this was to link himself with divinity. Yeah, that's why he started doing that, calling himself the Sun King, because it linked him to divinity, which is what his entire bloodline is attributed to, divinity as a whole. The harp and the lion are to link him to Apollo, the son of Zeus. You see how it's starting to make sense now, right? Now, when we start getting into the gods, the actual Greek gods and all the gods around not just Europe, but around the world, they weren't gods. They were a very, very, very advanced civilization of humans that I want to be ambivalent here and say that we're either mistaken for gods, right? Because of the tech that they used, they just saw it as magic, saw it as divine. Or they fooled us into believing that they were gods and used that to their advantage. I think both could be true, to be perfectly fair. They could have been mistaken and then just used that to their advantage later on. They're always white, always, like I've said countless times, blonde haired, blonde, red and platinum blonde haired. And blue, green, aquamarine or grey-eyed. They were never Middle Eastern looking. They were never black. Even the Zulus and most of the old tribal legends talk about them as being pale-skinned with that hair colour in the eyes. They always look distinct from who they were. Viracocha, when you look at South America, yeah, it said this countless times. So, this is another area where that psyop about Israel comes in. They link it to the line of David because it lends legitimacy to the Israel and Jew hatred, which are being programmed with. Everyone talks about the great noticing. It's amazing how everyone's noticing, but you still can't talk about Israel and you still can't talk about Jews. And they say this whilst talking about Israel and talking about Jews, getting millions of views and millions of followers and no repercussions. Now this was sudden, how this happened. Just out of the blue. Why is that? You look at the document releases and the content creators that are, or researchers that are showing you these documents, and they will highlight certain parts of certain documents or underline them, yeah? This state or Israel's done this, or they're linked to Israel in some way or Jews in some way. But when you read the whole passage, it'll tell you outright, it was owned by the US and their allies, which allies means us. When the US talks about their allies, what they actually mean is the UK. It's just that they can't say they're completely tied through the intelligence world with the UK, so they have to put it in that sort of shrouded comment in a way. But people don't notice those bits because of the bit that's highlighted. And the reason why, and the people that are doing this know this, as soon as you highlight something on one of those documents, 90% of people won't read anything else on there. They'll just read that highlighted part. And because it's been shown in that document, and it's appeared in that document, they'll just immediately think that that's the be all and end all. That's what it says. Whereas it may just say the trained, not employed, trained by Israeli intelligence, perhaps. Everyone knows why that the vast majority of people, when they read a newspaper article, will just read the headline and maybe the first paragraph, and that's why they put everything that they want you to know, right? To know in that headline and those paragraphs, right? The headline to draw you in and drag you in and grab you so you'll look, and that first paragraph to just tell them what they want to hear because they don't want to read the rest of it. Can't be asked, yeah? The same is true with these documents. That's why they do that, highlight certain bits, underline certain bits. They never tell you what's in the rest of it. They do this a lot, and it's a manipulation technique, right? It's the same with taking truthful statements or truthful scenarios, right? And just twisting the wording just a little bit, right? Just a tiny bit, doesn't take a lot, just very subtle, changes the whole context of what either that scenario or situation was, or what's actually been said. And this is infuriating, because this is another manipulation technique that is used quite aggressively by our intel services, yeah? Within propaganda. The same with the highlights and everything else. It's all propaganda. This is why this Psywar series, for me, is going to be probably my most important series I've ever done. Because I'm going to teach you all this stuff. Come hell or high water. I'm going to teach you all this stuff and then you'll know. This is how they're engineering people into this widespread sort of hatred towards Israel and Jewish people, right? That's what they want. That's what they want. They demonise the Jews, they elevate the Muslims, right? Which is what they're doing. If you notice, that's what they're doing. The IRGC are just innocent bystanders in the whole region, and how could Israel do all this to them? Yeah? Whilst they're killing all the civilians. Oh, it's a Mossad blooming talking point and blah blah blah. Those people who are saying that are either completely thick as fuck, right? Or they're intel. Now you can tell the stupid ones because they don't get many views. Yeah? It's not because they're suppressed. You can literally talk about Israel all you want now. Yeah. I saw another video by someone the other day saying how that hashtag Palestine was suppressed on TikTok. Well, big what? Still doesn't stop people talking about them, though, does it? Does it? Doesn't affect it, really. Doesn't affect it in the slightest. Those people that are still talking about it still getting the same amount of views. Why is that? It's owned by a Jewish platform, that's why they're like banning that hashtag. So what? They're just taking orders like everyone else. From an element that's not Jewish. They just get paid a heck of a lot of money. Sort of. Sort of. We'll get to money some other time. It's not real. And truth is told. But we'll come back to that some other time, like I said. All this situation with Joe Kent, right? And with the missiles hitting Diego Garcia. People are blaming that on Israel, right? The Diego Garcia sort of missile strike. Iran, it's been well known, right? Iran have had ICBMs, right? Intercontinental ballistic missiles for at least 15, 20 years. They were supposed to have dismantled them, right? This is why people think that they don't have any, right? They were supposed to have dismantled them. And we know that they didn't. Because they were still going ahead with the nuclear program. And we know they were going ahead with the nuclear program because we've not only had their version of the Speaker of the House come out and say it, right? And says, when he was asked, why has no one said this before? He said, well, yeah, loads of times, but no one listens. No one listens to me. No one listens to the Prime Minister of Iran that said exactly the same as well. We've enriched to this amount. Why have you done that? As a deterrent. Pardon? It's not really a deterrent, is it? It's like waving a red rag to a bull. When you open your negotiations with, we have enough 60% uranium to make 11 nuclear bombs, and when we get to 90%, you're fucked. But look at all these drones that we've made, and look at all these hypersonic missiles, and we're building them at a faster rate than you can develop countermeasures to stop them. Things get a bit worrying. And this is what people like, and I'm going to call you out, right? Because it really annoyed me today when I watched your video. Dino Bin. When things like that happen, right? When they say stuff like that, they're not really negotiating. That's a threat, right? It's as simple as that. This is all fact, by the way, right? Organisations like you quoted yourself, like the IAEA, which is the International Atomic Energy Association, right? Agency, sorry. Who are a group of weapon inspectors, yeah? My great uncle was on that board at one point, right? He was a nuclear inspector. He actually went over to China. But anyway, that's beside the point. It's going off topic. But they even said there's certain areas they won't allow us to go, right? And this is very suspicious, yeah? Certain areas we wanted to see, yeah? We wanted to inspect, and they wouldn't allow us. The areas where we could go wasn't any sort of missile or nuclear technology being developed. But these areas that we wanted to go and look at are suspected areas where they were being developed and they weren't allowed to go. And this happened countless times, right? The last time were 2024, I think, and they said the same. They won't let us in. The only reason why you're going to do that is if you're hiding something. And if you're hiding something, it's very likely those same missiles, that same payload that you're trying to create. Something you never mentioned, Mr. Bain. Joe Kent, you were glazing, licking his ass during the video I watched. But you never even mentioned the fact that for around a year he's been investigated by the CIA after he got caught leaking information. For 2 to 3 months, I think it was the beginning of the year, mid-January, he was barred from all security meetings, all classified security meetings in the White House, barred, right? Over his suspected leaking and passing information on to the enemy, right? So everything he said in that letter is verifiably bullshit, because he wasn't allowed in those meetings ever whilst they were organising all of this attacking Iran. So yeah, you didn't mention that. 2 months at the same time that he got barred, right, from those meetings, the CIA handed over their investigation to the FBI, because the CIA can't prosecute him, the FBI can. Tucker Carlson was his go-between between him and the IRGC. The only reason why Tucker Carlson is being investigated is because he showed up on their monitoring of Joe Kent, and he showed up on their monitoring of the IRGC. When he talks about he's getting done for speaking to people in Iran, he's not telling you the whole thing there. Who would Tucker be speaking to in Iran? It won't be just normal everyday guy on the street. Yeah. CNN have also been implicated, by the way, in all this. Some of the CNN reporters are also banned from White House press meetings. Yeah. Because they've been caught going straight after from those into the Iranian embassy in the US. He didn't mention Joe Kent's wife's associations with Max Blumenthal, who is very he holds Hezbollah and Hamas and the IRGC in high praise all the time, glazing them all the time. It's suspected that he's also possibly is working for the IRGC in some capacity. He's also a very dodgy journalist. He makes up evidence a lot of the time as well. He's not unknown for doing that, right? And this is who his wife works for. Then there's Joe Kent's sudden flip, all the way up to October, November last year. He was towing the party line in a way, I suppose you could call it that. And then all of a sudden flipped out of the blue. Was pretty much out of the blue. And this happened roughly when he started going public with all this, roughly when the FBI investigation started. But he was already under investigation for a year before that. All of this you don't mention. It was probably leaking information to Candace Owens as well, to be fair, because of Andrew Colvert, I think it is. He passed his text messages on to someone who was in the White House, he said, in the Trump government, and all of a sudden Candace Owens has got a screenshot of these text messages. Most people are, I think, pretty accurately believing that was probably Joe Kent. Again, fixing a narrative. These people, Candace Owens, Tucker Carlson, Ian Carroll is another, Stu Peters, are all CIA. A particular clique of the CIA, as I've mentioned before, called the Deception Industrial Complex. Joe Kent is also a part of that clique. I think we can pretty much say that's a guarantee, judging by his pedigree in what he's done beforehand. He was involved in anti-terrorism, so knows terrorists like the back of his hand, was part of the CIA Special Activities Division or Department or Unit, depending on what you want to call it. That is basically the command control structure for Red Cell, and Red Cell is their false flag unit that talk to think and act like terrorists, that are also part of the DIC, same as our E squadron over here. Not all of them, right, let's get this straight, but they do farm those units because of the work that they do and the nature of the work that they do to use for their own purposes. Yeah. None of this you mentioned. A lot of it you won't know. A lot of it you talk about like you do know. You don't know fuck all, mate. Let's get this straight. You don't know fuck all. Your information is very spotty at best. And the way you twist words, it's interesting. I used to like you. Now I'm wary of you.